Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tag1 TeamTalks. I'm Preston So, your host and moderator, and I'm going to be speaking today with our dear friend Laslo Horváth, based in Vienna, Senior Laravel Developer at Tag1, and of course, our good friend Michael Myers, Managing Director at Tag1. Welcome to our special edition of our Tag1 TeamTalks series. We're doing a little bit of a different bent on the series today. This month, we are all dealing with coronavirus and this awful pandemic. The impact that social distancing is having on our lives is palpable. And for those of us who have children, it's an incredible challenge to be able to work with our kids, make sure they're not bothering us while we're trying to work, and all in all, make sure that they're keeping healthy and keeping also mentally healthy during this really tough time. One of the biggest things that we know is happening with a lot of parents around the world is everyone has to be homeschooling now, whether using distance learning programs or e-learning tools or their own homeschooling curricula. And we wanted to share a little bit about how on the Tag1 team, we're using technology to make it more interesting for the kids and also easier on us. And joining us today, we've got Laslo, and I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that led you on this interesting path, figuring out a solution for your own schooling. So, as I understand it, also in Vienna, schools have stopped, and kids still have to keep on learning, right? I mean, what's your kind of situation like right now?
Yeah, so schools in like mid-March, schools were closing. Actually, they have like emergency running schools. Basically, if you are some of the staff that has to go to work, like medical staff or like grocery stores or police, things like that, you can take your kids to school. They will be taken care of there. But like the government asks everyone who is in a position to stay at home with the kids to do it. And this is like what, I don't know, like 75% or 80% of the people did. Of course, you want your kid at home with you. If I'm staying home, I want my kid to be here as well, not taken to school. And so they did a lot of distance learning programs, but those are more focused on like more exam-like, more they just want to see if your kid did the exercises and if it did learn. And the learning itself is something that you have to do at home with the kids. So you get a lot of paper, you get a lot of things, or you also get the exercises you have online, but that's just material. So like the teacher role is still on you. It's still something that you have to do. And different countries have different approach for this. There are countries that like have whole television programs dedicated to learning. So, you know, and here they decided, okay, let's use the cool learning platforms that we have. Unfortunately, they couldn't use Google Scholar because of privacy concerns, as it always is with EU. So they have their own platform. It's called Anton. It's pretty cool. But as I said, it's mostly just for distributing material and like examining if your kid, like if you submit it, then they know like, okay, you took a picture of everything that they did and that's it. So like my kid is preschool. So what they do is they just learn the letters and learn how to read, and basic mathematics like subtraction, addition, and things like that. So like for me, the biggest thing was like my son, he has to learn how to read, write, has to learn all the letters. And I was like, okay, since I have a lot of work, we have a project that should launch soon. So I have to invest a lot of hours on that. And, you know, the most productive hours during the day when you can actually work are also the most productive hours for the kid as well, when he has most concentration and he can perform at his best. So I don't want him to start learning at 7 p.m. I want him, you know, to do it like he did it in school from 9 or 10 until noon, because preschoolers, they don't have such long school days as other kids. So I had the idea after talking with a friend, because a while back I did some speech-to-text and speech recognition implementations. So I was like, yeah, maybe we can use this. Let's see what's the current state and how good it is. And, you know, if we can automate it, why not? We're software developers. We're like used to automating a lot of things. So this was something that sounded like a nice challenge, and if successful, it could actually help save time. So that's where the whole thing came from.
Very cool. And one thing you mentioned that's very interesting to me is that you've got a background in speech-to-text, text-to-speech. And, one thing I know about you, Laslo, is that, years ago you built an ERP system. And this was back in the early days of kind of speech recognition and speech synthesis. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like and sort of what was the prototype you ultimately came up with?
Of course. So, well, back then I used to work for a pretty big company here that was building an ERP system. So basically they were building on top of SAP. So, SAP has a lot of modules, but if you want something custom built, it costs a fortune. So they were basically dealing with companies that needed something specific that was not there in SAP, and then they built the whole ERP enterprise based on that. So they needed something, like they wanted to do a showcase. There's it was like a summit in Germany that's yearly, and they wanted to show off something cool. So they wanted to do AI, and back in the day, like the whole AI movement was going towards the chatbots and things like that. So I was like, yeah, why not? We can do a sort of like a chatbot in the whole front end of the application, where you could just like type in sentences and the software will interpret those and do something with it. So there were a couple of platforms that were active back then. So Google published theirs, Facebook published theirs, and Microsoft just came out with it was called Lewis. I'm not sure. I haven't checked in the meantime if they changed it, but it was their AI platform, and it was the best of the bunch. So this is not like not marketing or anything. It was just really the easiest to use, because the goal was that also the management itself could teach the platform the sentences. So I don't know, you can type in random sentences. You have in the Microsoft tool itself, you teach it, like you say, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the intent. These are the subjects in the sentence. And then after you give it a bit of learning, it was able to like return you the intent. So the goal was, I don't know, you want to order hand sanitizers, 50 of them. You can just type in like order me 50 hand sanitizers, and it would go to the backend, because the backend already had some workflows and everything, and you would end up with an order that was ready to be approved, and that was it. So it was pretty cool for a showcase. We weren't sure if there's actually some real life use cases for it, because executives and things like that, so we tend to be older people who are not so technology prone, but for a showcase it was cool. And then I was like, okay, I know that HTML5 has a speech recognition standard, so I was like, why not try that? So I just built a layer upon the whole natural language processing that was first do the speech to text, and then I just pass the sentence on and do it from there. So it was pretty cool, and it actually worked, but that was 2016, so it was just the beginning, and it wasn't that good. I mean, I have a bit of an accent in English, but it was terrible at recognizing what I wanted it. So if a German tried it with a thick accent, it would never go as planned. And they just had English back then, so the locales were also depending on like the browser you were using. So like Google Canary had German and Spanish and Italian and French, but the stable Google Chrome version didn't have it. So that was, just a showcase, and I tabled it. It was fun. It was like a nice research project. I did something cool, and it was in the back of my mind. And now I was like, okay, let's revisit it. Let's see how far it has come, and it has really come a long way. So it has, with Siri, with Echo, with all the other tools, they really learned a lot about speech recognition. So it's now in a much better state. So it's really usable now, so to say.
Very cool. And, I have a very strong interest in voice myself and chatbots. And I think, the problem you just pointed out around speech recognition being very difficult for people who don't speak, let's say, the expected dialects or the expected languages is a really big problem. Yeah. Very much so. So I'm very curious, could you show us how it works? And, this tool you built is really, really fascinating. I think, it's a language pedagogy tool. It's to help students learn by reciting sentences that are written on the page. And just for those of us who are listening instead of watching this episode of Tag1 TeamTalks, Laslo or I, either one of us could go ahead and describe what's going on. Actually, maybe it's easier for you, Laslo, to do that since you've got the controls. And if you could just describe what's going on at the same time so we can make sure that we're doing this for our listeners and anyone using assistive devices.
Just to notice, this is now in German because, in Austria, my kid goes to German school, but we will switch to English at a later stage. But let's start with this one, with the default one. So you should be able to see my screen now. So basically what we have is a very simple user interface where we have a text area to input the text that we want to read, for the kid to read. And this is something the kid does itself. Basically, first he has to type in the text, practicing letters. And after that, he has to read it, and then the software checks if he's reading correctly. So I will just go through a short sentence that's like a normal sentence that a preschooler should be able to read here. So, das Monster wird ganz blass vor Glück. Bis morgen ruft es. Ruft es. Okay, and then they get like a nice animation, fireworks, that they know that they did their job correctly. So this, normally kids, preschoolers read a bit slower, which is good because it's easy for the software to check one word at a time. And yeah, that would be it. Yeah, in a short demo. So it's actually like we are doing it daily, and like kids are used to touchscreen technology. Kids are used to computers, and it's something that they are eager to do. Like I'm really fortunate. My son loves books as well, so it's not a problem to get to give him a book and he'll like read it for half an hour or something, or just look at it. But I know a lot of parents who have good kids, but if you have a tablet, if you have an iPad, why would you take a book? It's interactive. You can have like videos, you have everything. Then a book is kind of lame compared to that, So this like interactive way is, I think, much better for the kids themselves.
So a question about that solution you built. I think it's a really amazing tool, and I can see you going up against Duolingo here very soon. There's a big question that I have, which is there a third language available beyond just German and English? Can you do it in Hungarian as well?
Yeah, it's possible. So I haven't tried it in Hungarian. I'm not sure, but every language that's supported by the browser itself, you can do it. So basically, it just involves changing one line of code. We can do it in English. So you'll see you just change the locale and type a sentence in that language and it works.
So that's one of the benefits of using, I think, this HTML5 underlying API, because you can rely on the browsers instead of having to supply all of the speech recognition algorithms yourself or any of that kind of stuff, which is how people used to do it, back in the early 2000s and before. It was a wild time.
I was actually, during my university studies, I was part of, when I was doing my master's, I was part of a team that was doing it in Serbian because I studied in Serbia. And they had to do everything from scratch. And they did automated, if you call the bus line, you want to know when the bus is leaving. So they did it for blind persons so that, they can do it with just language. And it was so much work. And I did, I think, a Skype game. Back then, Skype had this API where you can build games, and we did a game, I think a Mahjong puzzle or something like that for blind people that they can just do by voice. It's really cool, but that was nothing easy like the HTML standard. This whole thing is 100 lines of code, so it's really simple. It's nothing major.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. We talked a little bit about the HTML5 standard and how speech recognition is now part of it. And it's come a really long way in the last few years. I know that as well. But I understand that, you put together 100 lines of code, about 100 lines of code, and it's HTML5, which is probably a fair amount of the lines of code, and JavaScript and SVG animations. So how did you set up the JavaScript to be so simple here?
Yeah, it's basically the the speech recognition itself. So all the logic in the code is just parsing out which word was read and comparing it to the results that the speech recognition API gives back. And it triggers, like after hearing, it listens for a bit. You can configure that as well. And then it returns you a result. And after it is certain that it heard the final result, after you pause in your speech, it tells you, okay, now this is the final result. And it gives back, normally it gives back multiple words with a certain like probability. They say like, okay, I'm 98% certain that this is what the user said. So for me, it was simple because I don't need to do any parsing. I just compare the word with the highest probability with the word I was expecting to hear. And if it matches, I mark it as green. The kid knows, okay, now I can read the next word. It was easy. But in a more like sophisticated software, you would maybe go through the list and check, okay, maybe one of these, if I wanted to achieve this, maybe like this is what the user actually meant. Or you can actually, how the chatbots are doing, they ask back. So did you mean like whatever? Or even Alexa asks, maybe you meant this and not that. So these are some, like if you have a workflow where you go through steps, you can backtrack one step, ask question, get it right, and then you can continue. So this is all integrated in the standard itself. So it's really easy to work with it. So my job was just comparing strings.
Is this all built into the browser? Would it work offline, or does it require it?
Actually, I'm doing it offline now. So I mean, not offline, but I just opened an HTML file and that's it.
Wow, that's really amazing.
No server, nothing. Just I didn't want to do any Laravel backend or anything. That's why I kept it vanilla.js and HTML, because I can just send it to anyone and they can just open it and that's it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the real benefits of doing this in, and by the way, that telltale sign was the URL bar for any of us who were watching that demo. You could see that it was not on the web. So, you said, no server, no nothing, it's just HTML and JavaScript in the browser. And I love the fact that you did that architecture in such a way where, you don't have to set up Laravel. You don't have to have somebody you're going to share this with use Laravel. And I think this is really one of the key things that makes this application so compelling for those of us who are potentially working with a lot of folks who are dealing with social distancing and a lot of the coronavirus kind of effects of the pandemic. We want something simple. We want something that's very quick and easy. Now, so I want to talk a little bit about your plans for this, because you just mentioned, you just shared with us that you're going to be potentially sharing this with other people. What's your kind of next steps in the roadmap for this? Like how many years will it take for you to beat Duolingo to a pulp? Is there any sort of prediction you have on that front?
Yeah, so I don't have any major plans for now. It's just I would like to publish it because there are 3 of us now. I shared it with a couple of friends and they tried it and they were like, yeah, why not? This is cool. So let's share it to more people. So I want to clean up the code a bit because I have some logging and things like that where I experimented a bit. So I'll publish, then I make the GitHub repository public. So I just like share it with people so that they can check it, they can take a look. Maybe somebody will want to contribute as well. And I do have a couple of minor tweaks that I want to do because this is for like really basic preschool level kids. I would like to introduce like levels, because if somebody has a kid who's in 3rd grade, they should be reading fluently. So they want to, maybe the software should check for whole sentences and not just words. So the matching algorithm has to be specific for that level. And for even more advanced kids, I mean, I don't think they would need to use it, but maybe whole like paragraphs should be read like in one go, and then you can just compare if it was correct. Yeah, that was one thing. And I would like to introduce lessons, because now you have to type in. It was purposefully done because the kid first types it in and then it's read. But maybe just choosing lessons, where you have predefined text and that's it. So you don't have to copy paste it from somewhere and you just have it in there. So these would be things that would be interesting for the future.
Absolutely. And I actually think that there's a lot of potential here, not just for preschool, students or those who are just learning to read and write, but also for language learners in general. I think if you're learning German, or if you're learning Hungarian, let's say, then these are really great approaches for that.
Yeah, of course.
Very cool. Now, so I want to dig a little bit into some of the speech recognition, because I think that's really interesting here. One of the challenges that you just called out was there's a very big difference between analyzing an initial just a single word and matching that to a string versus, let's say, an entire paragraph. Do you see any challenges in kind of scaling up to the ability to get to that advanced level where you can read an entire paragraph and have that be interpreted by the parser as well?
It's actually possible. So with the standard, with the API itself, you can configure it in a way. You have to play around with it, so you have to tweak it in that case. So this is like basic default settings. If you tweak the timeout, so the wait for the person to read, if you manipulate the results a bit, it's fairly easy. So it wouldn't take just 90 minutes. It would take a bit more work, but it's not too complicated. So actually, when you have a challenge, if you don't have an idea how to do it, it's complicated. If you actually have like a pattern in your head and you know what to do, it's not that complicated. So in this case, it's doable. It's not something that's extraordinary or takes like really a certain amount of skill. It's built into the API. It's just leveraging what's already in there.
And I think that just points to, how much of this is becoming more and more part of the foundation of browsers that we already have. I think that there's a really good benefit to living in this era when we can rely on these APIs that already exist, that are we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We don't have to rebuild all this stuff from scratch. And I think it really points to a very exciting future for voice in this context.
Of course, for me, it's amazing, like what you can build together. You have tools like if this then that, you can leverage that, you can combine it with your own implementation for something like this, you can trigger things. It's amazing. If you have the time that's required for it, and people have time now, you're sitting at home, you can do something besides your normal work. And, I like to learn things. I'm sure, most of the developers are like this, you like to tinker with things, you like to try things out. And this is something that you can do. It's really crazy how much you can automate right now. Like I'm already starting to build like a command interface for me where I can just tell my computer, okay, start my Tag1 customer X project and start the timer. I don't have to click manually always, and it will do it. And if I leave, I'll just tell it, please stop. And, so things like this, you can play around with it, see where it goes. This is the interesting part. And as you said, it's amazing what everything that's on offer, what you can leverage. And I think a lot of people are not even aware how easy it is. You think you look at Alexa and you're like, wow, how this is so complicated. No, it's not. It's just try it and you'll see.
Definitely. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that GitHub repository, because I'm certainly going to pull it down. What's funny is that I started learning Hungarian recently, and I have a copy of the book to shoot, which is a very popular children's book in Hungarian. And it would be great for me to be able to put in some of those sentences into this and see if I can get my Hungarian pronunciation to be a little better.
Hungarian is like my native language, Serbian and Hungarian. I'm from a mixed marriage, so you chose the hardest language. Everybody says Hungarian is like really hard. But yeah, feel free.
I'm up for the challenge.
I will try it out in Hungarian, and I'll let you know. Like you can just configure it and try it.
It'll be a fun experiment. We'll report back on another episode on how that went. All right. Well, we are running out of time here, so I wanted to take a little bit of time to do our normal segment that we always do every single episode, which is the aside tag. I'm looking for a better name still. If you have one, we're open for suggestions. It's not a very good name, but I like it. So just for maybe 1 minute for each of us, let's share something that we've been interested in recently, something cool that's been going on, something that we're doing right now that we find interesting. Laslo, let's start with you.
Yeah, so actually I was looking forward to Laravel 7 release, and because it has the technology that we talked about last time, the live wire, but it came out with really, really a lot of cool features. And one of them is they changed like the way you can manipulate strings in Laravel. So yeah, you can now chain calls together. So it's really like they took what was a really great developer experience, and they took it like to a whole other level. So it now offers so many things that it takes me, and I'm experienced in Laravel. I always follow everything, and it takes me like 2 hours to go through the release log and see like, okay, now I can use this, and it's just, yeah, for me the biggest news in the last 2-3 weeks was the release of Laravel 7. I've been slowly migrating the projects to use it. There's just one breaking change, or breaking-ish, so to say. So they really do this amazing job where migrating to the new version is a pleasant experience. So it was, for me, that's like what I like noticed in the last couple of weeks, what was like my preoccupation.
That's amazing. I haven't actually tried out the new version of Laravel, so I'm definitely going to pull that down when I get up.
Yeah, you have X-Blade now. You don't have to use the Blade templating style. You can use like the same one that would use in Vue.js. So that's pretty cool. And you have Livewire. Now you have seamless integration between front and back end. So try it out, definitely. It's cool.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Well, thanks for that. And I'll share something that's going on with me. Speaking of voice and speaking of speech recognition and all of these things that relate to conversational interfaces like chatbots and so on and so forth, I just shared recently, last week, my first ever article for A List Apart. It's called Usability Testing for Voice Content. It's at alistapart.com if you're interested in anything to do with what we talked about today, from more of the user experience side of things, the designer side, the usability researcher side of things, or general user experience practitioner ideas about voice design. That's all there. So please feel free to check out that article. And Myers, what's going on in your world? Oh, he's frozen.
The boonies, the country, and the mountains, and I'm loving it up here. It's kind of fortuitous given all the social distancing. The challenge is we have no cell reception and almost no internet connection. And now, in addition to myself and my wife, we have other people, working from home all the time. And so our internet connection is horrific. And so I started looking into how I could solve this problem, because I promised my wife I could. And I came across this amazing solution called OpenMP TCP Router, and it leverages multipath TCP, which is the ability to communicate over multiple IP simultaneously. So I've set up multiple modems I was able to get a cell connection, with an antenna array, and our DSL line, which unbelievably gets less than 2 megabits down and barely 1 up. And it does true aggregation. So I can glue together these lines and get the aggregate bandwidth. It basically communicates with a private server that I have at Google Cloud. And so the modems, through a VPN talk together to the VPS, and it then talks to the internet and strings it back down to us. And, the previous solutions I looked at were typical load balancing, like least used connection, round robining people between modems. And I'm blown away. And I've tested another solution called Speedify, which is a little bit more sane. It does all of this for you out of the box. But the OpenMP TCP system has been performing better. And I'd love to do a tag team talk on it, because it's one of the most fascinating things I've worked on in a while. And it was really cool to get back to, system administration and some coding and testing. So I'm really excited about it, and it seems to be working. Our connections, in addition to being slow, are really unreliable, and it also adds a high availability component, because any one of the modems can drop out seamlessly in the background, and the connection continues to work. So I'm thrilled, and we're close to a viable solution for the absolute basics.
This has been a long, rugged saga for you across many episodes. Well, I do wish you luck, and I hope you can get that good reception that we all know and love. And we are just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on this latest episode of Tag1 TeamTalks. All the links that we mentioned today, whether that means the HTML5 speech recognition API or some of the other things that we talked about today, also whenever Laslo's repository goes live, all the links that we mentioned are going to be posted online with this talk. And when the code is up, we'll also link to it there. If you like this episode of Tag1 Team Talks, please remember to share, upvote, subscribe, send it to your grandparents and your loved ones. Check out past talks at tag1.com/tagteamtalks. As always, we love your feedback and any topic suggestions. If you want to hear about a certain topic, if you want to bring Laslo back to talk more about Laravel, if you want to bring some of our old guests back to talk more about their projects, write to us at tagteamtalks@tag1consulting.com. I want to give a big thanks to our friends Laslo and Michael Myers here today, and thank you so much for joining us. Until next time.
Thanks, guys.